Hey you guys, welcome back to my channel. So today I am building a fireplace surround for this corner stove for a client of mine. If this is something that you're interested in, then stay tuned. So my intro was just way too long, so I decided to do a voiceover right here. I decided to use a particle board to put as a backing for the fireplace. I didn't have a lot of studs to work with, and so I thought this would be an easy way to be able to attach my mantle and other trim pieces to. And so that is what I did. And then here I am getting ready to cut out a rectangle around the outlet that was on the wall. I did that by drilling a hole and then inserting my jigsaw blade and cutting out that rectangle. I didn't want to charge my client a whole other sheet of particle board, so I did use what I had left over to kind of piece together the backside. All right, so here you see the trim on the wall, and she didn't want the trim left there, so that was another reason why we decided to put the particle board on the back, was to level that out. And I just kind of taped the design to give an idea of the height and where the mantle would be. But here is that piece of particle board with the outlet cut. So that's the first thing that we are going to put up, and we're going to screw that into the studs in the wall. And we also repeated that process on the adjacent wall. Next, I took the leftover pieces that I had cut and I leveled those on the wall as well, up to the point where we would be putting the mantle on the very top. And then for the gap between, I did put some scrap pieces that I had just in my garage to kind of bridge that gap. And then it's always useful to use your children to help you clean and vacuum up your messes. That is what my son is doing. He's amazing. So here I am cutting down the majority of the mantle wood pieces. I decided to use select pine just because it's a lot smoother and nicer of a wood. And I ended up using, for the majority of everything, I used 1x6s. I did use a 1x8. And then I also used some trim pieces, which I played around with. And you can use a 1x2. I ended up cutting down a 1x8 into smaller portions just because I felt the 1x2 was too big.
All right, so I have my sides cut and now I'm kind of laying it out to give me an idea of what it's going to look like. I am using a 1x8 to go across the top of the mantle. I guess I should probably be on the other side because it looks like the bottom, but this is the top of the mantle. And because I want to add some molding and some dimension, I'm going to take my leftover 1x6 and I'm going to measure that same width as my 1x8, which is about 7.5 inches. And I'm going to cut those two pieces and they will sit on top of the 1x6s, and then the offcuts are going to go at the base of my left and right side. So let's go ahead and get to that point.
So just an FYI, you want to make sure you're paying attention to the exact dimensions of your boards. These are both 1x6s, and I don't know if you can tell, but one is slightly longer or wider than the other, and that's going to make a big difference. I want to make sure that I put the right piece with the matching long vertical pieces that I'm putting on each side. That way they will end up flush on each side. It's not really that big of a deal that the one side is going to be, you know, a 1/16 inch bigger than the other side. You're not going to be able to tell, but as far as putting the extra molding around it, it's going to make a big difference. So watch for that. All right, now it's time to finally start putting things together. So I wanted to make sure to cover that edge particle board after I put my select pine on, So I did have these thin strips of select pine that I went ahead and glued and nailed around the edge. That way you wouldn't be able to see the particle board. With those pieces on, I went ahead and I attached my 1x6s. Again, I glued and nailed all of these pieces to the particle board. And then after attaching those scrap pieces that I described before, I went ahead and added the 1x8 across the top. Another tip that I have for you is when you're nailing these pieces, you can always make sure to nail in a discrete area. For example, I nailed where the molding and trim pieces would be going around the outer edges so that it would cover the majority of the nail holes.
All right, things are looking pretty good here. I'm pretty happy with how things are coming along. So I'm gonna put the mantle up, and we decided to use they're stair treads, and I cut them down to be a better length, or a better width, I mean. And I cut one of them at a 45 degree. I'm gonna lay that on the wall, and because the corner of the wall is not exactly 90 degrees, I am going to take my other board, stack it on top, mark a line so that they will both fit perfectly. And then I will just line my miter saw up to that line and that angle. And then they should fit perfectly right in the center, despite the corner of the wall not being 90 degrees. So that is what I am working on now. We're gonna do that and then we'll go from there.
So to join the two mantle pieces at the 45 degree-ish angles, I went ahead and used a biscuit joiner. That is what tool I was using right there. And then I grabbed my biscuits and I glued, and then it was a little bit tricky, but we did end up getting it clamped tight enough and let that sit to dry. Once it was dry, I was able to take it out and sand it down, and pretty much that seam almost completely disappeared. So to attach the mantle, we went ahead and pre-drilled and then screwed through the top into the back portion of the fireplace. And then we went back and we filled those holes and sanded them down nice and smooth. I forgot to mention that I purchased some corbels to go on the corners, and so I did attach those, and that allowed for some leverage on the top mantle shelf. From there, it was finishing up a lot of the trim pieces, which again, I went ahead and used some 1x2s, and I kind of framed everything out up until the point where I routed my own molding piece, which you'll see soon.
Okay, so originally I had bought this molding right here, and I liked it, but once I put it up on the fireplace, I was just like, it just really doesn't match the rest of the style that I've done. So I made my own molding with a handheld router, and it's the first time I've ever done something like that, so I'm actually like pretty happy with how it turned out. So that's what it looks like. I just did, I don't even know what it's called, but it's got a rounded bit, and I used the handheld router to route that groove all the way down. I literally do not have I think I have like 1/8 of an inch of wiggle room here. So I have to get my measurements exact, or else I'm gonna waste this piece of wood, and I don't want to do that. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this cut at 90 degrees to fit my corner, and then take it over, and hopefully it'll work and look good. So here's another update. I have got all of the molding pieces up. Everything is coming together really nicely. I did fill all the nail holes and the cracks with a spackling and caulking around seams where necessary. And as far as the molding, you can use pre-made pieces that are already cut, like 1x2s. I felt like the 1x2 was just a little too wide. So I used some 1x8s and I ripped them down on my table saw to make them, I think they're 1.25 inches. And then, so I used that to do that. And then down here is where I put that molding that I made with my handheld router. So now I am going to go ahead and give everything a really good sand and start priming and painting.
All right, so check this out. So originally we were going to put up some barnwood, and my client didn't really like that look. It was too dark. So we found this vinyl flooring at Home Depot, and she really liked it. So we decided to go ahead and use that. It was really tricky. We were not able to use a nail gun because it kept fracturing the top layer of the vinyl. And so we actually had to go back and pre-drill little tiny holes and use really tiny nails to nail it to the particle board. But look, it looks amazing. My client's happy. I'm happy. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. It's kind of hard to make videos when you're doing projects for clients, but I enjoyed it. She enjoys it. If you like it, comment, subscribe, and we'll check you out next time.